The Galactic Council had assembled on the planet Orcs, a world at the center of a vast, neutral sector. Representatives from dozens of advanced species filled the grand chamber, each species carrying its own history of conquest, discovery, and technological marvels. Their meeting was held in a soaring hall carved from the planet's natural crystal, its reflective walls amplifying the gravity of the discussion at hand. They had all heard the reports about humanity, their sudden, explosive rise through the galaxy, their impressive feats, and their unyielding drive. But something about the humans didn't sit right with them. The Council's primary concern wasn't just that the humans had entered their domain. It was that they had done so with a peculiar approach. While most of the galaxy's civilizations fielded entire fleets, humanity had sent just one ship, the Leviathan. The vessel was immense, technologically advanced, and crewed by just a handful of humans. The reports were unclear. The Leviathan had braved hostile space, navigated political tensions, and even brokered peace in the most war-torn regions. It had done things no other species could claim to have done with a fleet, yet the humans persisted with just the one ship. The rest of the galaxy's superpowers had assumed it was a temporary phase, a clever trick, but the humans had been doing this for years. And now, they were expanding at a frightening pace. Why? Asked Morka, the eldest of the Scarith, a species that had conquered more star systems than most could count. His voice was deep, filled with the weight of centuries of conquest. Why have they limited themselves to one ship? They have the resources. They have the technology. Yet they choose this odd, isolated approach. It's illogical. Perhaps they are weak, suggested Lyril, a diplomat from the Allori, known for their vast fleet of stealth ships and advanced espionage tactics. A single ship might be all they can afford, and the rest is a facade. I disagree, countered Zathrix, a towering warrior from the Vargan species, whose fleets had dominated star systems with ruthless precision for millennia. We've seen the records. The Leviathan isn't just any ship, it's a fortress, a mobile military base, and more than that, its crew. They think differently. They operate as one, more in tune with each other than even the most coordinated fleets. This is no facade. There's something else going on here. The room grew quiet as the council members exchanged glances, each grappling with the same troubling thought. Humanity's one ship wasn't a fluke or a limited venture. It was a symbol of something far deeper, something they couldn't quite comprehend. Perhaps we should see for ourselves, suggested Vorith, a diplomat from the Illyrian species, known for their extensive network of spies and historians. Send a representative to the Leviathan. Ask them directly. The others nodded, the idea taking root. If the humans wouldn't speak plainly about their intentions, perhaps a direct encounter would provide the answers they so desperately needed. The decision was made. The representative would be dispatched. The question echoed through the chamber. Why are humans limiting themselves to just one ship? As the meeting adjourned, a quiet uncertainty hung in the air. The council was united in their concern, but one thing was certain. The answers were not going to be simple, and humanity's greatest mystery was only just beginning. The diplomat, Illyrian-born Vorith, stood on the bridge of the Leviathan with his arms crossed, studying the view of deep space. The immense ship seemed almost alive, its sleek hull cutting through the void with an eerie silence. There were no obvious signs of grandeur, no shimmering lights or luxury chambers like he was accustomed to in other fleets. Instead, the ship's design was simple, streamlined, and focused, exactly what one might expect from a species that relied on practicality above all else. Captain Kara Greer entered, her presence commanding despite her size. With her uniform pressed and her expression stern, she carried the weight of the Leviathan's legacy on her shoulders. She glanced at Vorith but said nothing, instead motioning for him to follow her. As she led him down narrow corridors, he couldn't help but notice how every space aboard the ship seemed functional. There were no extravagant decorations or unnecessary luxuries. The hum of the engines beneath their feet seemed to pulse with purpose, as if the entire ship was synchronized with the crew's focus. They passed rooms where humans worked at consoles, their eyes glued to screens or engaged in heated discussions. There was an intensity about them, an urgency that made Voreth uncomfortable. "Why just one ship?" he finally asked, his voice breaking the silence between them. "Why not more? You have the technology. You've proven your capabilities time and time again. Yet you refuse to expand." Kara didn't immediately answer. She led him to a large, open control room, the heart of the ship. It was filled with holoscreens and intricate displays that cycled through data in real time. There were a few humans working at stations, their focus unwavering. The ship was alive with activity, but there was an air of calm competence, as if this crew had been doing this for generations. She paused, letting him take it all in before answering. "It's not a matter of capability," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "Humanity has the resources to build entire fleets if we wanted. But the Leviathan, this ship, embodies our philosophy. We focus everything we have on one thing, one mission. If we were to spread ourselves thin with multiple ships, we risk losing that focus." Voreth raised an eyebrow. "A single ship to what end? To conquer? To explore? To survive?" Kara replied, her eyes locked on his. "Humanity has always been a species defined by struggle. On Earth, we faced extinction. We were once on the verge of being wiped out by our own mistakes. The Leviathan represents everything we've learned. Our strength is in unity, in focusing all our energy on a single goal. One ship is all we need because we put everything into it." She turned to face the holographic display in front of her. "We've seen what happens when we try to stretch ourselves beyond our limits. It leads to chaos, to fragmentation. This ship is a symbol of our resolve. It's not just about what we can do, it's about how we choose to do it." Voreth looked at the captain, his mind racing. He had expected a different answer, something that fit neatly into the typical rhetoric of military superiority or conquest. But this was something else entirely. He could feel it, the quiet strength in her words, the calm confidence that surrounded her crew. He wanted to ask more questions, but before he could, Kara turned to him, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You'll see for yourself soon enough. The Leviathan will prove to you that it's not about numbers. It's about what we can accomplish with just one ship." Voreth wasn't sure what he expected, but this wasn't it. The humans weren't here to conquer or dominate the galaxy in the traditional sense. They had a different kind of power, one that wasn't immediately obvious. He realized then that their one ship wasn't a weakness, it was a challenge. He didn't fully understand, but he was starting to. And that, more than anything, unsettled him. Voreth had expected to be shown the ship's weapons systems, or perhaps a fleet operations room where he could admire the humans' military might. But instead, Captain Kara Greer led him down another set of narrow corridors, deeper into the bowels of the Leviathan. The air grew colder and the atmosphere shifted, as if they were entering a more intimate, almost sacred part of the ship. Voreth, ever the diplomat, tried not to let his curiosity show, but he couldn't help but feel uneasy. She stopped in front of a thick, reinforced door, one that looked completely out of place compared to the rest of the ship's utilitarian design. The door hissed open at her command, revealing a dark, dimly lit room. Inside, massive shelves lined the walls, each filled with relics, artifacts, odd objects, and ancient books. It looked more like a museum than a military ship's storage room. Voreth stepped inside, unsure of what he was seeing. The objects on the shelves weren't just random trinkets. They were meticulously arranged, and many of them had the unmistakable signs of extreme age. He could feel the weight of their history, but it was unclear what significance they held. He could see fragments of old weapons, worn-out maps of long-forgotten places, and strange devices he didn't recognize. There was an energy in the room, something palpable, almost like the air itself hummed with the echoes of the past. Kara walked to one of the shelves, and picked up a small weathered book, its cover worn by time. "This is what we carry with us," she said, her voice quieter now, as if the space demanded reverence. "These artifacts, these pieces of our history, they remind us of who we are and how we survived." Voreth studied her, puzzled. "I don't understand. What do these objects have to do with your ship, with your survival?" Kara's eyes softened, and she placed the book back on its shelf. "Humans don't just survive by strength alone. We survived because we learned from our mistakes. Every object here, every artifact, is a lesson. They represent our struggle, our resilience. The Leviathan carries more than just a crew and weapons. It carries our entire history, our collective memory. It connects us to everything we've been through to get here." Voreth's mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. "You're telling me the Leviathan is more than just a ship. It's a symbol." Kara nodded. "Yes, exactly. It's a symbol of what humanity has endured, what we've learned. This ship is our living legacy. It's not about showing strength. It's about understanding the lessons of our past and using them to move forward." She paused, her gaze intense. "Long ago, humans nearly destroyed themselves. We almost wiped out our own species. But from that destruction, we learned something crucial. We learned that we can't survive by dividing ourselves. We had to come together, focus our resources, and dedicate ourselves to something greater than ourselves. The Leviathan is the culmination of that journey. It's a single, focused effort, just like humanity itself." Voreth looked around the room again, his perspective shifting. It wasn't just about power. It wasn't about technology or military supremacy. This was something deeper, something that spoke to the very core of humanity. The ship wasn't a weapon or a fortress. It was a testament to survival, to unity in the face of destruction. Kara's voice broke through his thoughts. "And that's why we've kept it to just one ship. Because as long as we remember where we came from, and how we overcame our greatest mistakes, we'll never lose ourselves. The Leviathan is more than just a ship. It's the heart of humanity." Voreth had never encountered anything like this before. The humans weren't just another empire seeking dominance. They were a species defined by their resilience, their ability to learn and grow from their darkest moments. He could see now that the Leviathan wasn't just a tool. It was a living reflection of humanity's journey. And suddenly, the question of why they only had one ship didn't seem so strange. The tension aboard the Leviathan was palpable as Voreth listened to the Council's official challenge, transmitted through the ship's communication system. The message came from the highest-ranking leaders of the Galactic Council, and it was clear from their tone that they were testing humanity's resolve. "We, the Galactic Council, propose a demonstration of your species' abilities. The Leviathan, your single ship, shall face off against a fleet of our finest vessels in a series of simulated war games. This will prove once and for all whether humanity's philosophy of singular focus can stand against the might of the galaxy's most advanced forces." Voreth stood beside Captain Kara Greer in the ship's command room, his mind racing. The challenge wasn't just a test of the Leviathan's capabilities. It was a test of humanity itself. The entire council had openly doubted the humans' ability to face their fleets, believing that one ship, no matter how powerful, couldn't possibly stand against the combined might of their forces. Kara's expression remained calm, but Voreth could see the flicker of something in her eyes. Determination, perhaps. Her hand hovered over a console, her fingers poised to respond. "We accept," she said, her voice steady. The transmission cut off, and the room grew quiet. Voreth studied Kara, impressed by her unshakable calmness in the face of what seemed like an overwhelming challenge. "Do you think they'll actually understand what they're up against?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. The idea of pitting the Leviathan against a fleet of the galaxy's finest ships seemed like a suicide mission, even with the ship's advanced technology. Kara turned to him, a slight smile curling on her lips. "It's not about proving we can win, Voreth. It's about proving we can think differently. We don't need fleets. We only need our focus." She turned back to the command center, where the crew was already preparing for the upcoming exercise. Voreth couldn't help but admire her resolve, but a part of him remained skeptical. How could the Leviathan possibly outmatch an entire fleet of ships? The humans' philosophy of singular focus and unity could only go so far in a galaxy where numbers and firepower often decided the outcome of battles. Still, there was something about Kara's confidence that made him hesitate. Perhaps there was more to humanity's way of war than he realized. As the days passed, the war games preparations grew more intense. Kara called in her most trusted officers, outlining the strategy they would employ. It was a strategy that seemed almost reckless, but each move had a calculated purpose. The crew would rely not on brute force, but on every advantage they could find: speed, unpredictability, and, most importantly, their ability to think outside the box. "We won't fight like they expect," Kara said, addressing her crew. "We'll use the environment, our surroundings, and above all, our adaptability. They'll rely on what they know. We'll make them question everything they think they understand about war." Voreth, watching from the sidelines, was stunned. He'd expected tactical meetings, battle plans, and detailed strategies. Instead, what he saw was a team of humans working together, not just as soldiers but as thinkers. They weren't concerned with overwhelming force. They were concerned with one thing: making the Council fleet think they had no idea what was coming. The day of the war games arrived. The Council fleet gathered at a neutral staging point, waiting for the Leviathan to enter the combat zone. Voreth, standing on the command deck, felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had seen the might of the Council's forces before, ships that could decimate entire planets. The odds were overwhelming, yet something about the way the humans carried themselves made him wonder if the outcome wouldn't be as certain as it appeared. As the Leviathan moved toward the battleground, Kara's voice rang through the command room. "Stay sharp. This is where we prove humanity's greatest strength." The time had come, and Voreth wasn't sure what to expect anymore. The war games began with a silent tension, the vast expanse of space stretching endlessly before the Leviathan. On one side of the battlefield, the Council's fleet loomed like a storm cloud. 12 ships, each a titan in its own right, equipped with cutting-edge weaponry and shields that could absorb massive amounts of damage. On the other side, the Leviathan sat alone, a singular speck against the backdrop of the stars. Voreth stood at the bridge of the Leviathan, his heart pounding in his chest. The sight of the Council's fleet was overwhelming, but the humans weren't daunted. Captain Kara Greer stood at the command chair, her gaze fixed on the incoming fleet. She didn't flinch. She didn't even seem to blink. It was as though the enormity of the situation didn't even faze her. "Captain, the Council's fleet is moving into position," Voreth said, looking at the tactical display. The enemy ships were closing in, their weapons systems primed and ready. "They're not wasting time." Kara's lips curled into a tight smile. "Let them make the first move." For a long moment, the Council fleet remained still, perhaps expecting the humans to break under the pressure. It wasn't until the enemy ships began their advance that the Leviathan moved, shifting with a grace that seemed impossible for a vessel of its size. It wasn't the heavy bombardment that most would expect in a situation like this, nor was it a desperate retreat. It was something else entirely. Without warning, the Leviathan shot forward, barreling straight for the enemy ships with incredible speed. The Council ships opened fire, their blasts lighting up the void, but Kara's ship danced around each blast, moving unpredictably, using the nearby asteroid field as cover. "Impressive," Voreth muttered, watching the display. The humans weren't playing by any rule he was familiar with. They weren't fighting the way anyone would expect. The Leviathan wasn't outclassing the Council ships in firepower, it was outthinking them. The ship's evasive maneuvers were so erratic that the Council's targeting systems couldn't lock onto it, leaving them firing into empty space. "Keep them guessing," Kara ordered, her voice calm. "They rely too heavily on their tech. Let's make them second-guess every move." The Leviathan continued its wild maneuvers, weaving between asteroids and using solar flares to disrupt the sensors of the incoming enemy ships. Every time a council ship thought they had a clear shot, the human ship would vanish into the chaotic backdrop of debris. At times, it seemed like the ship had disappeared entirely, only to reappear moments later, coming at the council ships from a completely different angle. The council ships grew more coordinated, realizing they needed to adjust their tactics. They formed a loose perimeter around the Leviathan, trying to trap it, but it was already too late. The humans had learned their patterns and adapted faster than expected. Kara gave a single command: deploy decoys. Within seconds, dozens of small drone-like ships were launched from the hull of the Leviathan, scattered across the battlefield. They weren't just decoys, they were perfectly timed to simulate a retreat, creating false signals that confused the council ships' targeting systems. The fleet, now uncertain of which targets were real, hesitated. It was exactly the opening Kara had been waiting for. Now, Kara muttered, her fingers flying across the control panel. The Leviathan moved into the heart of the enemy formation, its weapons coming to life. With a precision that seemed almost surgical, it unleashed a barrage of pulses that disabled one of the smaller council ships, causing it to spiral out of control. The remaining ships scrambled, trying to reposition themselves, but it was clear they were losing the advantage. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight outside conventional tactics. Voreth couldn't help but gape in awe. The humans weren't relying on sheer firepower. They were manipulating the very environment around them, using speed, misdirection, and ingenuity in a way that was completely alien to him. He had expected a standard confrontation, but what he was witnessing was something entirely new. The battle wasn't over, but the council fleet was no longer confident of victory. The humans had thrown them into disarray, and with each passing moment, they began to realize that the Leviathan wasn't just a ship. It was a lesson in how to think differently, how to approach war with a mind that was as unpredictable as the humans themselves. As the battle raged on, the once dominant council fleet was now on the defensive. The shockwaves from the Leviathan's sudden counterattacks reverberated through the enemy lines. Kara's strategy had thrown them off balance, but she knew the game wasn't won yet. The council's ships were formidable, and while they were disoriented, they wouldn't be defeated so easily. Voreth stood at the tactical station, watching the chaotic display on the holoscreens. The once unified formation of the council fleet had splintered, with several ships pursuing the Leviathan through asteroid fields, while others were frantically recalibrating their systems. The decoys had worked, too well, in fact. The council ships had fired on their own drones, wasting precious energy. The humans had bought themselves time, but the real challenge was yet to come. "They're regrouping," Voreth said, his voice tense. He could see the council's remaining ships beginning to form a new, tighter formation. They were going to try to corner the Leviathan once again, but this time with more coordination. "I know," Kara replied, her gaze unwavering. She stood tall at the command center, watching the shifting patterns. "Let them." The human crew, as composed as ever, continued to work seamlessly. The ship was a living entity, every officer perfectly synchronized with the others. Kara was fully aware of the risks. They could be overwhelmed if they didn't act soon. But she wasn't about to panic. In her mind, she knew something the council didn't. While they had brute strength in numbers, humanity's true power was adaptability. "Prepare to engage them in the open," Kara commanded. Voreth frowned. "Open? You're not going to stay in the debris." "No. They think they can trap us in the field, but we can't win if we keep running. Time to show them what we can really do." She turned to the comms officer. "Transmit a message to the fleet." The officer nodded and began typing at his station, sending a broadcast across the battlefield. The message was simple and direct. "We're not running anymore." The council fleet tightened their formation, confident they had the upper hand. But the humans had one last surprise to reveal. As the Leviathan shot out from the asteroid field, it suddenly deployed a full energy shield, a shimmering blue barrier that stretched around the entire ship. The Council's ships fired at once, launching missiles and energy blasts in unison. The weapons hit the shield with tremendous force, but the energy shield absorbed the impact. There was a resounding hum as the shield flickered but held strong. The Council ships had underestimated the sheer power of the human technology. The concentrated energy was enough to temporarily stagger the attacking ships, but it wasn't enough to breach the shield. "Full charge," Kara ordered. "Let's see how they handle this." In a breathtaking move, the Leviathan accelerated toward the enemy fleet, using the force of its own shield to plow through the barrage of weapons. The shield crackled with each impact, but it remained intact, holding the ship together as it closed the gap between them. The Council ship scrambled to adjust, but the Leviathan was too fast. With one swift maneuver, it twisted and fired a precise blast directly at the Lid Council ship's engine port. The shot exploded on impact, sending the ship spinning out of control. The remaining Council ships faltered. The humans had come out of nowhere, using everything they had at their disposal, not just their technology, but their understanding of the battlefield. They had thrown away the predictable tactics, and in doing so, had taken control of the battle. "Two down," Kara said, her voice almost too calm. But there was no mistaking the satisfaction in her tone. The humans had struck hard, and now the Council was scrambling. The remaining Council ships tried to regroup, but they were no longer fighting with confidence. They had expected to overwhelm a single ship, to break it with sheer power. But the Leviathan had defied every expectation. Voreth watched the screen, his mind reeling. The Council had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. This wasn't just about technology or numbers. It was about their entire approach to war. The humans were proving something far deeper than tactics or firepower. They were showing that, sometimes, the most dangerous weapon wasn't the one you carried. It was the mind behind it. The remaining Council ships, now severely weakened and disoriented, began to retreat, their previously confident formation breaking into chaotic attempts to regroup. The loss of two of their flagship vessels had rattled their command, and they scrambled to maintain control over what was left of their fleet. The Leviathan had proven itself more than a match for their combined firepower, and now the humans were pushing their advantage. Captain Kara Greer stood at the center of the command room, eyes fixed on the screen displaying the Council ship's desperate attempts to retreat. She could sense the victory was within their grasp, but she didn't allow herself to relax. Not yet. The Council was proud, and they would come at the Leviathan again, harder this time. But Kara had a plan, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. "Close the gap," Kara ordered, her voice as steady as ever. Voreth, still standing at the tactical station, looked at her, a mixture of awe and disbelief on his face. "Are you sure? The rest of their fleet might be retreating, but the remaining ships are heavily damaged, and they've still got a significant amount of firepower left. They'll fight to the bitter end." "I know," Kara said, her gaze unwavering. "But we've already shown them what we can do. It's time to finish this." With a few swift commands, the Leviathan shifted its course, closing in on the remaining enemy ships. The Council had no idea what they were about to face. Despite the damage their ships had sustained, they were still dangerous. But it was clear to Kara that the humans' unpredictability had already broken the Council's will. They had thought that overwhelming force would win the day, but now they were fighting a war they couldn't understand. Voreth's voice was hesitant, though. "Captain, the remaining ships are repositioning. They're trying to form a last-ditch defense." "They can try," Kara replied, her lips curling into a faint smile. "But it won't matter." As the Leviathan moved forward, Kara tapped a few controls on her console, and the ship's systems began to recalibrate, preparing for one final assault. The remaining Council ships, though damaged, had formed a new defensive perimeter. But it was too little, too late. The humans had a distinct advantage now: momentum, and they weren't about to waste it. Voreth watched as the human ship charged toward the Council's defensive line, A wave of realization washed over him. This wasn't a reckless move. It was a calculated one. Kara wasn't just aiming to defeat the fleet. She was aiming to demoralize them completely. "Fire when ready," Kara ordered. The weapons systems of the Leviathan hummed to life, energy rippling through the ship. A burst of concentrated energy lanced forward, striking the lead council ship's shield. The ship's defenses flared brightly as they absorbed the attack, but the shields began to flicker under the strain. The humans weren't just firing with raw power. They were targeting weak points, exploiting the very flaws the council had tried to hide. Another blast came, this time hitting a secondary ship, sending it spiraling into a nearby asteroid field. The remaining council ships tried to retaliate, launching a volley of missiles and energy blasts. But the humans had learned from every encounter, and the Leviathan dodged with speed and precision, effortlessly evading the barrage. Kara's voice rang out again, this time sharper, commanding, "Give them everything we've got." The full force of the Leviathan's weaponry unleashed itself in a single, overwhelming strike. The concentrated energy from the ship's main cannon hit one of the remaining council ships directly in its engines. The ship exploded in a flash of light, and its debris scattered across the battlefield like stardust. The council fleet was no more. The last of their ships surrendered without a fight, their commanders recognizing that they had lost not just the battle, but the entire contest. They had failed to understand what made humanity so dangerous. They had underestimated not just the firepower of the Leviathan, but the sheer will and adaptability of the humans behind it. Voreth stood in stunned silence, watching the council ships drift into the void, disabled and beaten. The battle was over, but the victory was something more profound than just military supremacy. It was a message to the galaxy, a message that humanity was no longer a species to be dismissed, to be underestimated. "We did it," Kara said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. "But don't get comfortable. The real battle is just beginning." For the first time since arriving on the Leviathan, Voreth felt a shift within himself. The humans weren't here just to survive. They were here to change the rules. And the galaxy would never be the same. As the aftermath of the battle settled, the remnants of the Council fleet drifted aimlessly in space, their commanders surrendering to the Leviathan. The once proud vessels, built to withstand the galaxy's fiercest threats, were now little more than husks, their firepower shattered by the humans' ingenuity. Yet for Captain Kara Greer and her crew, the true victory had just begun. The bridge of the Leviathan was quiet. The hum of the ship's systems was the only sound as the crew went about their duties, securing their position in the now desolate battlefield. Kara stood at the center of the command room, her eyes fixed on the view outside the ship's viewport. The stars stretched on, vast and indifferent, but to Kara, they held the promise of something far more significant. "We won." "Kara," Voreth said, approaching her with a cautious but impressed tone. "The Council fleet is finished. This is unprecedented. I didn't think it was possible." Kara turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "We didn't just win a battle, Voreth. We won the right to be heard." Voreth raised an eyebrow, clearly puzzled. "What do you mean?" "The Council thought they could push us into submission. They thought our way of thinking, our singular focus, would be a weakness. They were wrong." She paused, her eyes scanning the rest of the bridge. "It's more than just a battle. It's a statement to the galaxy that humanity will no longer be ignored." It was clear to Voreth that Kara wasn't merely celebrating the defeat of the Council fleet. She was acknowledging the larger shift that was happening. Humanity had just proved that they weren't a species to be underestimated, that they had the strength to stand up to even the most powerful forces in the galaxy. "Where do we go from here?" Voreth asked, still processing the weight of the victory. The implications of what had just happened were far-reaching. The galaxy had watched the humans defeat the Council's fleet with only the Leviathan as their instrument. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a cultural one, a declaration that humanity had arrived, ready to carve their place in the galaxy. Kara's gaze softened, a quiet confidence in her eyes. We'll use this moment, this victory, to bring others into the fold. It's not just about us anymore. It's about creating a future where we aren't divided, where we work together, learn from each other, and build something stronger than any fleet. This is the beginning of a new era. Voreth nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words. In that moment, he realized that humanity wasn't interested in just survival or dominance. They were interested in creating something more meaningful, an alliance based on trust, unity, and understanding. The war games with the Council had been a test, yes, but it was also a gateway. The galaxy would be watching the Leviathan, and now humanity had the opportunity to shape its future. As Kara turned to face her crew, she addressed them with the same unwavering determination that had carried them through the battle. This victory is just the start. We've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of. But our work isn't done. We've earned our place among the stars, but now it's time to prove that we're ready for what comes next. The crew's morale was high, but there was no arrogance in their celebration, only quiet pride. The battle had been won, but the true challenge was just beginning. The Leviathan was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's resolve, their ability to think differently, to adapt, and to fight not just with weapons, but with ingenuity and purpose. We'll be ready, Kara said, her voice firm, for whatever comes next. As the crew returned to their stations, the ship began to move once more, leaving the remains of the Council fleet behind. The Leviathan's journey had only just begun, and humanity was poised to make its mark on the galaxy, one calculated step at a time. The galaxy had seen humanity's potential, and now they would wait to see if humanity could build something that lasted, a new era where strength came not just from firepower, but from the unity and wisdom that had carried them this far.